This is a true story. He had a friend who was a theologian and an avid British gardener, and he had a new neighbor move in, and he was gardening. And so the neighbor came out, introduced himself, and said, "What do you do?" He said, "I'm a theologian." To which the neighbor replied, "I'm an atheist." And so at that point, the theologian asked him, have you read St. Augustine? No. Have you read St. Thomas Aquinas on God? No. What about Meister Eckhart or Julian of Norwich? No. Perhaps you've read some of the Eastern philosophers, Maimonides or Averroes or Avicenna, maybe Ghazali, Razes? No. Haven't read them either. What about some of the moderns, Plantinga or Kraft or maybe William Craig? Don't know them either. He said, "Sir, you are not an atheist, you're an ignoramus." So I think the anecdote reveals something about people today who glibly dismiss belief in God as inherently unreasonable. And yet, they'll say, "I don't believe in God," without ever looking at some of the arguments. The same people, however, will believe in things like quarks and neutrinos. They'll believe in dark matter. And they won't know the science that substantiates belief in those things. They simply trust the scientists that believe in such phenomena that we can't see. We have theologians also that have their arguments for believing in the things that they don't see. And just like most people believe in scientists without really knowing their proofs, many believers, simple people, believe what their teachers and their philosophers tell them without having the proof. So we forget that the age of science is also an age of faith, just like the age of faith was actually also an age of science. And something that we forget is that the epistemology of trust is foundational in our world. In the classical period of Muslim scholasticism, most theologians actually argued that belief had to be grounded in reason. And for this reason, even young adolescent students were taught the Kalam cosmological argument for the existence of God, which is in our creeds, because they didn't want this circular reasoning. And so for most people, what we call the age of faith, right, is actually an age of reason. Theologians of the age of faith considered their works pursuits of science. They grounded their arguments in logic and argued not for evidence beyond reasonable doubt, but for the preponderance of evidence. And we forget that this is what we use in our civil courts to determine the validity of an argument, the preponderance of evidence. But atheists demand the standard of criminal courts, as if God is a criminal on trial. They want beyond a reasonable doubt, which would, of course, eliminate the element of faith, which is so essential to theistic belief. The great theologians of the past grounded faith in reason because they believed that human beings are created in the imago Dei, or the metaphysical image of God. And since the faculty of reason is what separates us from animals, the God in whose image we were created must be a God of reason. And let's not forget also that many of the great theologians of the past were also working scientists of their time and accomplished mathematicians. Almost all of them were first-rate logicians committed to reason. Avicenna, who in the West is known for medicine, in the East was known for his metaphysics, his theology, and his logic. And so the great philosophers and theologians up until Kant sincerely believed that belief was logical and arguable, and metaphysics, or what we call first philosophy, captivated the best and brightest minds of the time. Our species has an insatiable desire to know. This is evident in children who always ask why. And that is the great philosophical question, why? So children are natural philosophers. The metaphysical question is, why is there something as opposed to nothing? And while most children have that innate wonder and quest for knowledge drilled out of them by what we call schooling, some retain it throughout their adult life, and I think Dr. Alvin Plantinga is such a one. Philosophers to whom the world never grows old, and children to whom the world is so new, live in wonder.